Hello Year 12 and welcome to Act 2, Scene 2, Part 1. So this will take you from the very start of the scene up to where Hamlet enters for the first time. So we have the King, Queen, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern and a bunch of other people in the court, and the King is happy that Rosencrantz and Guildenstern have come. So he is actually continuing on the theme of spying here and of secrecy, which we saw set up by Polonius as he asks for Reynaldo to keep an eye on Laertes for him. And Ham's supposed lunacy is obviously something that the king knows about right from the start of the scene. So he says, moreover, that we did much long to see you, the need we have to use you did provoke our hasty sending. So he's saying, I need you to help me with something. He then says, something have you heard of Hamlet's transformation? So call it. So rather than calling it madness, he's giving a softer title to it there. Sith nor the exterior nor the inward man resembles that it was. What it should be, more than his father's death, that thus hath put him so much in the understanding of himself I cannot dream of. So he's basically saying, I cannot understand, apart from his father's death, what on earth would be making him act this way, which is a little bit of dramatic irony here, because we as the audience do know that, and we in fact know that it's Claudius himself and Claudius's actions that are causing Hamlet to act as if he is mad. So the audience members can kind of have a little chuckle to themselves there and go, okay, Claudius, rightio then. And he said that being of so young days brought up with him, and sis so neighboured to his youth and havia. So he's saying, seeing as you were best friends with him in your youth, I'm going to ask you to spy on him for me. Interesting choice here. Not perhaps who I would have gone to, but it does sting a little bit more for Hamlet, I feel, as it's his childhood friends that have been called in by Claudius to spy on him. So it's not a particularly nice move of Claudius here. That you vouchsafe your rest here in our court some little time, so by your companies to draw him on to pleasures, and gathered so much as from occasion as you may glean. So this is the spying bit that we see there. Whether aught to us is unknown afflictions him thus, that opened lies within our remedy. So he's saying, once I know what's wrong with him, I can actually do something about it. Gertrude then continues on by saying, good gentleman, he hath much talked of you, and sure I am, two men there is not living to whom he more adheres. So you guys are his best friends. So again, this stings little for Hamlet. If it will please you to show us so much gentry and goodwill as to expend your time with us a while for the supply and profit of our hope, your visitation shall receive such thanks as fits a king's remembrance. So I personally take this as bribery, because she's saying, if you just help us out with this little thing, the king will thank you in a very kingly way. Okay? So that means some sort of gift. Rosencrantz does his due duties and saying, I will help you in any way I can. Guildenstern agrees with that. He's saying that we're both going to obey and lay our service at your feet. And the king says thanks. The queen also says thanks, and she says, can you please go see our son as soon as you can? Go and bring these gentlemen when Hamlet is. Guildenstern says, yes, we'll make ourselves helpful and pleasant to him. So they're trying to kind of buddy up to him and say, hey, what's really wrong? So Rosencrantz and Guildenstern exit with some attendants, and Polonius enters. Remember, his role is one of the advisors to the king, so he's coming in to announce that the ambassadors that the king sent earlier in the play to Norway, to the old king in Norway, not the dead one, just the old guy, have come back with news. The king says, oh, good, this is good news. And Polonius says, I assure you, my good liege, I hold my duty as I hold my soul, both to my God and my gracious king. So leading up to something here. And do I think, or else this brain of mine hunts the trail of policy so sure as it hath us do, that I have found the very cause of Hamlet's lunacy. So again, Hamlet's lunacy is coming up in this conversation, and Polonius thinks he knows why. The king is eager to hear and asks him to speak, but Polonius says, oh, maybe we should talk to the ambassadors first. The king then says, oh, yeah, we should bring them in. So Polonius goes out, and the king says to Gertrude, he tells me, my dear Gertrude, he hath found the head and source of all your son's distemper. And the queen has a really interesting response. She's very plain in her speaking here. She says, I doubt it is no other but the main, his father's death and our over-hasty marriage. So she's very plain in acknowledging that her marriage is something that has really, really bothered Hamlet, even though Hamlet hasn't actually given voice to that openly yet. Polonius comes back with Voltaman and Cornelius, so the ambassadors that have been over to Norway, and the king addresses them and says, say, Voltaman, what from our brother Norway? So what do you have to tell us? Voltaman then says, upon our first, and that means as soon as they heard, he sent out to suppress his nephew's levies. So as soon as the old guy in Norway, who is the king, heard of Fortinbras, the young prince's actions, he sent out people to stop Fortinbras from doing that. And he said that he thought it was preparations for a war they're undertaking against Poland at this time. And so he was so grieved that so his sickness and age and impotence was falsely borne in hand, sends out arrests on Fortinbras. So this comparison here shows the contrast between Claudius's virility and the helplessness of the old Norwegian king. And Fortinbras has come back and said, and been told off by his old uncle, basically. Similar thing to perhaps Hamlet being told off by his old uncle. And Fortinbras has made a vow that he will not arm himself against Claudius again. And then Old Norway was happy with that and gave him some extra money, and is commissioned to employ the soldiers that he had gathered to go and attack Poland. So then they give him a paper and they say, so Norway has a favour to ask. Can you please let Fortinbras cross your land with all of these soldiers and fight the Polish people? Which is an interesting response to a complaint from another king. But we need to notice in this speech that there is a huge contrast between Fortinbras as the rash young soldier in contrast to the scholarly and considered Hamlet that we have seen so far. And also, this is another image that we have in here of the impulsiveness of youth, which Laertes and Polonius did a very good job of expounding for us in their speeches to Ophelia about the fickleness and the impulsiveness of youth. And so the king says, I'll read your letter later and then I will send an answer, but thank you for coming home. And so the ambassadors and the attendants exit. Polonius then says this business is well indeed. So he's happy about the business that he's just heard about. And then he gives this flowery little speech, what duty is, what day is night, and time is time, and blah, blah, blah. And then I love this line. Therefore, since brevity is the soul of wit and tediousness, the limbs and outward flourishes, I will be brief. After he's just spent all that time on his flowery language. Polonius is a bit ironic in what he's saying here, and also he's in keeping with his character, because we know from his earlier scenes he likes to go on a bit and embellish things. So he's just going on a bit in true Polonius fashion. But he does say quite plainly, your noble son is mad. And then we have a little riddle here. Mad, I call it, for to define true madness, what is it but to be nothing else but mad? So this is a riddle that's actually quite important to the remainder of the play. And basically it's saying it would be madness to try to define madness. And this is a question that we need to think about as we look at Hamlet and Ophelia's madness later in the play. Are they truly mad? What does it mean for them to actually be mad? Is it just their behavior or is it their intention? So it's a bit of a riddle that that Shakespeare is essentially posing to his audience as they consider the theme of madness and of reason as it progresses throughout the play. The Queen then says another line that I really like: more matter with less art. So get to the point, Polonius. And then Polonius has a nice long flowery speech, which is him getting to the point. Madam, I swear I use no art at all. Okay. That he's mad, 'tis true, 'tis true, 'tis pity, and pity, 'tis true, 'tis true, a foolish figure, but farewell it, for I use no art. Was that not just art? Anyway, moving on from that. Mad, let us grant him then, so let's just say he's mad. And now remains that we find out the cause of this effect, or rather say the cause of this defect. For this effect defective comes by cause, thus it remains, and the remainder thus. Perpend, so think for a moment. I have a daughter, while she is mine, so I'm in charge of her while she's not married, who in her duty and obedience mark hath given to me this, now gather and surmise. He then reads out a love letter, which Hamlet has written to Ophelia, which really is quite a betrayal of her privacy, but anyway, Polonius doesn't seem to worry about that. And the Queen then questions, did this actually come from Hamlet? And then Polonius says, good madam, stay a while, I will be faithful. And then he reads the letter out loud, which is full of lovely little overtures from Hamlet and nice little flowery land. And then Polonius says, this in obedience my daughter hath shown me. So he's saying, I made my daughter hand these over to me, and now I have evidence to say that there is a relationship developing between them. And the king is saying, but how has this happened? And then Polonius then we'll look at this a little bit. But how hath she received his love? And then Polonius says, what do you think of me? So he's very concerned with his own appearance and perceptions of him. And the king says, as of a man faithful and honourable. So Claudius is again ingratiating himself with Polonius here. Polonius then says, yes, I'm going to prove that I am thus. When I had seen this hot love on the wing, so as soon as I sensed that this love was happening, basically I told my daughter to stay well away from Hamlet, and that they should not actually see each other anymore, nor should she receive any letters or any tokens of love. And she, being an obedient daughter, which he describes as, which she done the fruits of my advice, and he repelled a short tale to make. So he's saying, my daughter did what I asked, she sent Hamlet away, and then Hamlet fell into sadness, then into a fast, thence to a watch, and thence to a weakness, thence to a lightness, then to declension, and into the madness, wherein he now raves. So basically he's saying, all because Ophelia withdrew her affections, Hamlet has now become mad. And he then says, we're very sad about that. And the king says, do you think it really is? And the queen says, it could be, I suppose, yeah, it could be. And then Polonius says, hath there been such a time, I would fain know that I have positively said, 'tis so, when it proved otherwise. So he's saying, I am really, really sure that this is why Hamlet is mad. And the king then says, I don't know you to have been wrong any other time. Polonius then says, take from this, if it is to be otherwise, if circumstances lead me, I will find where the truth is hid, though it were hid indeed within the centre. So he's saying, there's really nothing more to find out, but if you really want to know more, if you guys need proof, because they're questioning him, if you guys need proof, I'll get that for you. And then the king asks, well, how are you going to prove it? And Polonius says, sometimes he walks for hours together here in the lobby. And the queen says, yeah. And Polonius then says, well, what I'll do is I'll send my daughter to talk to him, and then they'll make an encounter. So they'll see each other, and if he love her or not, and may not be from his reason fallen thereon, let me be no assistant for state, but keep a farm for Carter. So he's basically saying, if Hamlet doesn't show that he loves her as soon as he sees her when she walks down the hallway towards him, then let me lose all my titles. So he's basically saying, I'm so sure I would bet everything I have on it. I just want to pause here for a moment. What we need to look at here is the treatment of Polonius towards his daughter. So we already know that he was very harsh with her earlier in telling her that Hamlet's love was not true, don't think on it, it's just a fancy of youth, and even if it is true, it doesn't matter because he's going to be king. Now he's coming and saying, yes, he really, really does love her. So there's a bit of a contrast there between what he's told his daughter in order to get her to act one way and what he's saying to Claudius in order to serve his own purpose. But also we need to notice here, Polonius is offering up Ophelia to catch Hamlet, who he truly believes is mad. So he's offering up his daughter and putting her in danger's way in order to actually get his own way. I just wanted you to notice that about Polonius here and about how little value is placed on Ophelia. Last little bit here, and we're going to end there tonight. We will try it. So the king agrees to this plot of Polonius. They're going to test to see if Hamlet really truly loved Ophelia and if that is probably the reason for his madness.